4.
Day-4.
I forgot. Okay, Day-4. So, welcome, Dr. Kaushik Das. Here we have our speaker, Dr. Kaushik Das, who is at this moment joined from Denmark. And Kaushik Das is a tenure-track researcher in the Department of Wind Energy at Technical University of Denmark. He did his PhD at this DTU, that means Technical University of Denmark, in 2016. His research involves hybrid wind power plant, grid integration of renewables, weather-dependent power systems, and active distribution network. He has published more than 70 research articles in journals and conferences. He has citation approximately 500, and he has handled many projects related to wind energy or hybrid renewable energy sources. So, and also I must thank him that he has agreed to be part of this and to share his knowledge with us. Of course, the time management was a little difficulty, but still he has agreed. So I again welcome and thank you, Dr. Das. Now it's yours. You can start.
Thank you, Dr. Khanra. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can, but I'm not sure if it's full screen.
Is it the full screen? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's full.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you for the introduction. That was more than what I was writing to you. So thank you for the gentle, kind words. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about utility scale hybrid wind power plant today, and I would like to keep this a bit more interactive. So I'm not aware. How do we take the questions? Do we take the questions at the end or?
Yes, it's your choice. You can ask the participants, now only you can ask them that whether they will write in the chat box or they will unmute and they will ask you question in between or in the end of your lecture. You decide and tell them.
I would prefer that you just stop me because there can be this topic is very recent. I would come to that later. Why is it recent? So there might be some knowledge gap, and sometimes if if there are some technical terms which is not able, you are not able to follow, maybe we can you just stop me and put a question there and we'll take it, right?
Participants, if you can write it in the chat box or you can unmute and ask the speaker to stop and answer if you find it so. Okay, thank you.
Great. Then I'll start. I have few slides about DTU and DTU wind energy in case some of you are not conversant with DTU. So DTU is a technical university of Denmark. We have many departments, and DTU wind energy is a full department in DTU. And recently we have been ranked second in all the world in research ranking. So it's very research based organization. But so in terms of academia, I think it's safe to say that DTU Wind Energy is the global leader in terms of wind energy, and we have 4 main pillars: research, innovation, education, and scientific advice. DTU Wind Energy has existed for many years now. Like it started in, I think, 60s or 70s when it was the RISO National Lab, and in 2008 it was merged with DTU. So we had a major reorganization lately, so the name of the sections has changed, but the whole point of this slide is not to talk detail about the sections, but what I want to show is that how varied is this DTU or how varied is this wind energy field in itself. So we start with mesoscale modeling, for example, which are meteorological modeling using the satellite data and many other data where the time scale or the spatial scale is hundreds of kilometers. And then when we start downscale it to the wind farm level, then the spatial scale becomes tens of kilometers. And then we connect to the grid and also the structures which are in the range
Dash.
of sure.
Dr. Dash, can you please use that laser pointer? This pointer is
sure.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Yeah, nice. So when we are working with the structures here, then they are in few meters. When we are working with the gearbox and the generator and the blades, then we are going into working in the again meter level. But then when we are talking with the materials, then we are looking at the even nano structures, or in the composite materials we are looking from the nano. So we cover from hundreds of kilometers to few nanometers. And so it's a very varied interdisciplinary field. And so my presentation would also try to bring back all this, many of these kind of knowledges here. So it might be a bit yeah, challenging to cover all the fields, because of the we are experts in one field or another. uh, So in terms of this is 2019 data, but we have around 250 or a bit more now employees. We have people from 38 different countries working in here. Out of that, 21% is women, which we are not very proud of, but we are definitely increasing the number of women in our organization. So please feel motivated to join our group in as your in your future journey. Now moving on to DTU wind hybrid power plant team. So we are few people working on these topics, and we have a portfolio of projects ongoing at this moment, and few more are in pipeline. They are submitted for grants. We have a Professor Paul, who is leading quite a lot of activity in terms of research and developing the facility on hybrid power plant, and I am mainly leading the research of the hybrid power plant. But then we have many other experts who are contributing with their expertise. We have, oh, I should also acknowledge these presentations. Most of the work has come from the students, without whom I don't think, yeah, they are the major pillar, and we have um, tens of master students working on this field, and we work very close with industry. So we are academic organization, but still we are more closer to industry in terms of the application and the work we do. So less mathematics, more practice, I would say. So that would also reflect in my presentation. Thanks for bearing with the DTU things. So I'll talk about a bit background about the hybrid power plant before we move on to the technical details here. So how this field has evolved. So we started with wind turbines in 80s and 90s. We had individual wind turbines which were connected to the grid. From 91, we had the first wind farm, uh, first offshore wind farm, I would say, Nustel, which was fixed speed wind turbine based in Denmark. And then now the recent trend is that we were moving from wind power plants to the hybrid power plants. And there is a difference between hybrid power plants and hybrid power systems or microgrid. So there has been many years of work in hybrid systems or microgrid or mini grid systems, but what we are focusing more on the utility scale hybrid power plant. So we are talking about hundreds of megawatts of power plant. So that would look like any conventional power plant or any conventional or any wind power plant, which is getting more and more conventional, or solar power plant, in terms of providing the services and the motivation. So the motivation for a hybrid system or microgrid is mainly about maintaining the security of supply or minimizing the expected energy not supplied, or loss of load, loss of energy, and loss of load probabilities, and all those factors. But when we are moving into hybrid power plant utility scale, then the major criteria is to talk about uh, the profit or the revenue generated by the hybrid power plant owner, uh, or the developer, who tends to be big, generally very big companies. But so this is more looking from the power plant owner point of view. but that doesn't mean that that's not good for society. Rather, it's good for society if the bigger player starts implementing big scale of hybrid power plant that would reduce the cost, and then we'll have more renewable generations which will replace the conventional fossil fuel based generations. So what how does a hybrid power plant look like? So it's this is how it looks like. So you have hundreds of kilometers of land where you have many wind turbines and solar panels and storage. Still there is a bit debate on the what is the definition of hybrid power plant. When 2 weeks back we had a IEA topical expert meeting, and we were also discussing what are the definitions. For example, Americans, AC and LBNL, they have come up with some definitions. Wind Europe has come up with some definitions. Air Grid has also recently come, the Irish transmission system operators, they have come up with some definitions. So there is no clear definition what is a utility scale hybrid power plant or hybrid systems. But what we will be focusing at this point is that they will be having single electrical point of connection. So you can there is also very small demarcation between a hybrid power plant and a virtual power plant, for example. So the grid, the whole point of this is that this grid capacity and utilization. So generally the grids are getting more and more congested all over the world. uh, I guess all of us here are from India, so we are seeing that there is projection of 225 gigawatt, 175 to 225 gigawatt by 2022 to be connected to the grid. So, but the grid planning and the grid erection of new lines and cables and all those things takes years of effort. So reinforcement of the grid in itself is a very difficult task. So the whole point is that if you have a single point of connection to the grid, how can you use this better, utilize this grid capacity by putting more resources and controlling them behind these transformers. So that's another point of utility scale hybrid power plants. Then another important issue is the use of the cost of electrical infrastructure. So for example, I'll come to those results later, but in India, for example, let's take the Indian example. The solar has a capacity factor of 28% or 25% in general locations. In some of the location it can be 30%. And wind is also like even in we were taking some locations in near Andhra, in near Hyderabad, Nazirabad, and we were seeing the uh, around 24-25%. I do not exactly remember the number, the capacity factor. So what does that mean is that 25% of the time uh, these cables and this transformer will be used if I just put a single wind power plant here. Rest of the 75% time, the balance of system or balance of plant, the components which are used to transmit the power are being unused. Generally, in a wind power plant construction, around 20% of the cost in the wind power plant development comes from this balance of systems. So that's a huge amount of money we are talking about. But the point is that if we start putting more resources, it can be solar, it can be battery storage, it can be hydrogen, it can also be diesel, but we are now focused on more renewable based. So putting other kinds of resources, can we start increasing the capacity factor of this of the utilization factor of these components. The control center is mainly focused about maintaining the flow for the hybrid power plant, the flow in this point, and then the also provision of ancillary services or the grid code requirements and all those things are at this point of connection and not internally. That also shows that this is very much driven in terms of market driven, because the whole point is to make the profit for this power plant instead of just providing support to the grid. So the value is that increase the value of renewable generation in terms of energy market as well as ancillary services. How does it look the worldwide in terms of hybrid power plants? So the first hybrid power plant, which was in 2016, there was a Park Synog in UK, which was in 2016. They were hybridized. This is run by Vattenfall. There is a 3.6 megawatt wind, and they started putting more PV, 4.95 megawatt PV to make it hybridized. But still, it's a pilot project. This is not utility scale. And then the Kennedy Energy Park came up in 2018, which is still under development. As per my knowledge, it's not up and running yet, but it's like 43 megawatt of wind and 15 megawatt of solar and 2 megawatt, 4 megawatt battery storage. In Kavital in India in 2018, there came a big power plant, a hybrid power plant. And then there are plans, like for example, in many places in the world, in the Wheatridge in US for 380 megawatt of hybrid. Also India, this is a bit old. No, I think, yeah, also there was planned to launch 2.5 gigawatt wind solar hybrid auction in India. Out of that, 1.2 gigawatt of hybrid solar was auctioned for peak power supply, and I think few hundred megawatts, I do not remember the number, was auctioned for the farm supply. Indian MNRE also made policy for national wind and solar hybrid policy. So that is, and the majority of it is the utility scale and not off grid systems or not microgrid systems. So it's coming with a big impulse, the utility hybrid power plants in India. So I think this is also very relevant topic at this point in India and the world. Also, mega wind is like a Danish policy where Denmark is very famous for most of the wind farm or wind turbine manufacturers. So they have also they are also shifting their interest from only wind to hybrid facilities or hybrid solutions. There are also European level policies coming up and things like that. This is in the map. So it is also Herringvliet is a new one again by Vattenfall, which is in Netherlands coming up. Also, there is just auction has finished in Netherlands for Holland Knust, which is also for wind, solar, battery storage, and hydrogen. In India, also, like I said, that 1.2 gigawatt is coming up in terms of peak power plant. No, I think 900 megawatt is peak power plant and 300 megawatt is farm supply, but I might be wrong. But few more tenders are yet to come as per my knowledge. So what is the advantage or value of hybrid power plant? I have touched a few, but so in terms of infrastructure, so when you are acquiring the land acquisition is always a big challenge. So there is a reduction in land cost when you start acquiring more land for wind and solar, so you can get bigger lands. Also optimal use of electrical infrastructure and land, for example, access roads. In order to build those plants, you need to build those access roads and all those things. So there are infrastructure cost saving when you can combine multiple projects. In terms of project development, permitting process, getting certifications and all those, resource assessment, for example, if you can do it at the same time for wind and solar, because the weather is behind behind those projects is the same. So all the measurements and campaign and all those things, so that also saves substantial project development cost, but also peak performance and like performance costs. So we have less fluctuating production from wind and solar, but also storage increases flexibility, and also in terms of energy arbitrage, but also ancillary services. Also, reducing of the forecast error can also reduce the penalty you pay when you are not able to provide the services uh, you promise for. So that also reduces the penalties. And these are only few, but then there are many more, like increasing the lifetime of the wind turbine and things like that. But until now, uh, what I have talked is very much driven by the industry. So this is a field which has been driven by industry, and then academia and research institutes are slowly picking up. And except DTU wind energy, there are few universities in Europe who have also started working on it. Delft in Netherlands, Uppsala in Sweden, and few others have started working. But also in US, there are quite some effort in multiple labs, mainly led by the NREL. But I would still say this field is still driven by industry, and academia is picking up. So this field is really hot for research. If any of you are interested in looking into new research topics. So what we did, we created a Danish wind hybrid power plant forum, where we have around 36 members in the Denmark, and we are meeting twice every year to discuss how research or academia can help the industry in developing more, since they are a bit more advanced. And then we have identified few research topics where there is the major potential of collaboration between academia and industry. So we'll start with energy management system. Energy management system is like, how would you bid, in which market would you go in? Is it the spot market, or you go in the ancillary service market or capacity market? How you consider the uncertainties in terms of resources, or how would you include the storage lifetime into the picture? What kind of storages will be used for energy management system, and all those things. Next comes the sizing and siting, which has resource assessment. Physical design in itself is a very challenging problem. Like if you start reducing the land area requirements, then maybe wind turbines will start shadowing the solar. And how do you start modeling that? uh, NREL has started working on that. Also, DTU Wind Energy has some preliminary work, but we are not there yet. But this is a very challenging problem. Selection of storage technologies, which storage to select, and should you select only one storage for all the services, or would you like to hybridize multiple storage? And then also how much wind, solar, and storage should you put in order to meet certain requirements? Electrical design, how do you maximize the infrastructure use? For example, should you start making the DC coupled systems, or start connecting the like in just combining the concepts like I showed in the previous picture in the AC connection bus? How would you develop new kinds of control capabilities, like a black start capability or something? Or what kinds of grid services, is it additional support we can provide as hybrid in terms of grid services as compared to the individual technologies? Uncertainties and forecast, we are quite a lot working on that as well. That wind, you cannot do the separate wind forecast and solar forecast, because especially when you are looking at day ahead, or beyond 6 hours or something like that, because the challenge in that is the weather model is that is driving both the wind and solar resources is the same. So if you are using the reanalysis data, ensemble forecast, then the same weather model should be driving them. So you cannot just combine both of them, then it is not optimal. But then again, the combining all those wind and solar forecast, when you have specifically battery storage, how would you do that? Is it, what would be the purpose of that? Is it variability reduction? Is it maximizing revenue or profit, or is it something else, lifetime increase of the battery storage? So what is the logic behind combining those forecasts? That's also something new. Grid emulation and advanced test. There is no test and standards or test methods today for hybrid power plant. There is no regulation even. So when you might know that when you want to put a wind power plant, each of the wind turbines as a needs to be certified. But for example, if you start connecting some storage in the DC bus of the wind turbine, how would you certify those wind turbines? Unless they are certified, you cannot implement them in the practical system. So there are no test methods or even grid codes, for example, to include for the hybridization of the systems, hybrid power systems. Similarly, the models which we develop, how do you validate it when you do not have a reference hybrid power plant in the system to validate your models? And like I mentioned that 2 weeks back, we had we were DTU Wind Energy and NREL, we were co-hosting this IEA topical expert meeting where experts from all over around the world were connecting about hybrid power plants. And then we discussed what are the major challenges and the or major contribution of a IEA wind task can provide to the society. And the major thing is that we need to develop a reference hybrid power plant. That was the number one requirement from the industry around the world which came up. Then all these topics were in terms of power, and then we moved to the energy systems, where we also include hydrogen or methane and other topics which is keep becoming very relevant in Europe, mainly, to include also other kinds of it's called sector coupling, so include the other sectors, be it transport sector, energy, agricultural sector, or industry, together there into this plant. So if you are also putting a hydrogen electrolyzer inside your plant, how would that plant look like, and how would you control that? And this is not anymore a concept. Recently this Holland Knust project came up, or the auction came up, and the results are out now. And so that would also have wind, solar, battery storage, and hydrogen electrolyzer in there. Okay, so now I'll move to more technical terms, technical talks. So we can take 2 minutes break here before we move to the technical terms and understand a bit background if we have any questions.
So participants, if any of you has any question, please unmute and you can ask. That means everyone has understood, or they have after their lunch, they are feeling little heavy to ask the question. But in our case, like I see our participants are very eager to ask the questions. So maybe they are understanding everything, because this was a little bit non-technical. So I think
Yes.
the kind of
So maybe we can move ahead.
Yes,
with,
yes.
Yes. Good. So so just to give an example, right? So we took 3 locations in Northern Europe where we do not have much sun, but so in these 3 locations we have so in this Danish location we have quite high wind power, 42% capacity factor, but 12% of solar capacity factor. And then the yearly correlation is slightly negative. So this negative correlation is very important. Like even zero correlation is very good. That means that when the wind is increasing or picking up, solar is not. If it is negative, it's like they are having 180-degree phase shift. So when wind is peaking, solar is going down, and the vice versa. So slightly negative means that if I can combine wind and solar, then we get much more value in terms of getting power output from the wind farm. But the capacity factor is low. But in France, for example, the capacity factor in this location was 16%, a bit high. But we should also understand that solar capacity factors cannot be very high. Like we do not have sun in the night, so that takes away many hours of the year when we do not have. And even in the best places around the world, it's around 30% and things like that. So we do not get very high capacity factor in general. But looking at this, just a simulation of the data, this is very interesting. So what you can see that when you have higher capacity factor, so it's very dense, like in the green one, and the blue one is much less dense. So that means those hours where you have the wide gaps, you do not produce any wind and you will be using the solar. So what does it mean that so this is a simple example I developed for this in order to bring up to the more complex part later. So what does it mean that if we combine them? So let's assume a simple example that you have total HPP capacity of 500 megawatt, and evacuation capacity is also 500 megawatt. Means the grid connection is 500 megawatt. So what is the value of combining wind and solar? So for all the three locations, when I combine wind and solar, this is a linear combination of the capacity factor. How do we read it? So this axis is solar capacity by total capacity. This means when you have this zero, that means that zero solar capacity is the total wind capacity. For example, so Denmark, that is 42%. And when you are at this point in the axis, so then you have the complete solar capacity and zero wind capacity in your wind farm or in your hybrid park. So then it comes to be around I think 12%, right? 12%, yes. And any in between them, there it is a linear combination. So if you have this kind of system, that you have hybrid capacity, hybrid power plant capacity of 500 and the evacuation capacity of 500, then you will never combine these two, because you will always go with the one which you have maximum hybrid capacity, maximum capacity factor, in this case wind. But then what we said, that let's keep the evacuation capacity as 500 megawatt, but let's start increasing the hybrid power plant capacity more. So we started increasing it to 800 megawatt, and suddenly this linearity goes away and we see a non-linearity. And another thing what we see, that just combining these two, we have started shifting all these lines up. So we have started moving up those capacity factors much higher. So what does it mean? So what we started to see, that when you are putting more and more resources behind, what you are starting is to increase is the increase in the curtailed energy. So you are not able to pump energy to the grid, rather you are just curtailing the energy and you are losing the energy. So this, because of the curtailment, you get this non-linearity. But for example, if I take a random point like here, where you have 40% of solar and 60% of wind, what we get in Denmark, it's 48% capacity factor. So that is even more than the capacity factor if we had only wind. So there is a value in combining solar with wind in locations in Denmark where the sun is very low. We have very few hours of sun in Denmark. So still there is a value here. What we see, and what is why I chose this 40% capacity, because here my curtailment is also very low. So I am not spilling away energy. Just I put 40% more, so out 800 of or let's take 50% value. So 400 megawatt of wind and 400 megawatt of solar for a grid connection of 500 megawatt. I have negligible curtailment, but my capacity factor has increased more than what I was having only with the wind. So this, but what it does not say is the price or the cost. Of course, you cannot keep on putting wind and solar if it is not valuable. But luckily, the price of solar and wind are also going down. But then what we did is that we kept the wind evacuation capacity as 500, but we increased the wind power to 500 and solar power to 500. So 50% kind of scenario in the previous one, but the evacuation capacity is 500. And the another terminology here, overplanting. So overplanting is based on the evacuation capacity. So the overplanting ratio is here 2. So you are putting twice the resources as compared to the evacuation capacity. And then we started plotting the curtailed power. This is not energy, but the power. Then what we did is that we developed a cumulative or the CDF, the distribution function. What we see that 90% of this curtailment is less than 20 megawatt hour per hour. So that means that if I put a storage of 20 megawatt, then I can capture of 1 hour storage, then I can capture 90% of this curtailed energy. So that shows the value of storage as well, or increased dispatchability of the storage. But still we did not put the cost in it. We did not put the dynamics of the storage in it. That is it like if I put 1 hour of storage and then there are continuously 2 hours of curtailment, then I am charging the storage in the first hour, but I am still curtailing the energy in the second hour. So those things are not captured in this figure, but still it gives us a rough estimate that there is a value. In terms of just like I said that in terms of the energy capacity of the storage. So what we do is we plotted the autocorrelation of the curtailment. What we see that the whenever the curtailment is high in the first hour, it's also high in the second hour. And in these figures, we started increasing the solar power. So coming to this plot, but we started with 200 megawatt of solar power and started increasing it to 500 megawatt. So when we have 500 megawatt, remember that if we have 20 megawatt battery in this 500 megawatt system for this location, for the Danish location, that should capture 90% of the energy of the curtailment. But then how big that storage should be? So what we see that it can be up to 1, 2, 3, around 4 hours. Then in this location, if we have 4 hours, then the autocorrelation is up to 50%. That means that when the curtailment is happening, with this kinds of setup, for the next 4 hours, there's a 50% chance of having more curtailment in those in the 4th hour as well. So I would propose a 4-hour battery storage in this case. But still, we have not included the cost here. We have not included another thing is that we have not included the value in terms of revenue. That okay, I minimize the curtailment. Does it give us enough money in terms of revenue to do that? So those things are not put into this, and we'll come to that later. But this still gives us an initial idea how big the storage is. This is the scatter plot between curtail energy and the spot prices. So what we also see that the curtailed energy is much higher when the spot prices are also low. And what does that mean? That when I am curtailing energy, the price to sell in the market is low. That what does that mean? That it's it's cheaper to store that power into the battery storage or any storage and sell it when there is no curtailment these hours and the prices are more high. Okay, so that sets up our sizing methodology. Then let's move into the sizing. So what we need is electricity prices, the resources, and the capital and the cost, and then we do an optimization so that we get, this is a very simple model, right? We get the how much capacity of wind, solar, and battery we should put, how the state of the charge has been changing so that we can compute the life of the battery and things like that. We perform a technical and economic performance evaluation, and then we perform a sensitivity analysis that if I change some certain parameters uh, in my system, how would how would that impact my sizing? So let's see. So this is the general methodology, and now starts the mathematics.
Excuse me, I would just interrupt you. There is one question. I think, like, if that is not clear, then in future maybe they will have confusion. So she is asking, what is the significance of curtailed energy? But I think like the question is what the curtailed energy does mean or something. So
Okay,
if you
so
would
curtailed, it's a very good question. Thanks, Arti, for that question. Right. So curtailed energy is that you put any wind power plant or any power plant per se, right? And the main major aim of that, putting that in, is uh, uh, that you provide energy to the system. And this has a bit background as well. In Europe, where there is quite a lot of renewables now, we are moving to a subsidy free world. That means that government is not paying any subsidy to provide you generate energy for your plant. What does that mean? That means that if you are not able to sell that energy in the market, you are losing money. So that's the curtailed energy, is that you are not able to provide it into the grid. But even in the feed-in tariff, which used to be the case in India until few years back or a few months back, is that when you feed in every unit of energy, you get some money. So when you are starting to curtail, you are not getting the money for that energy. You are not able to put that in the grid. So that's very lost business. Even in the right now, there is the power purchase agreement auctions in India. Even there, the requirement is that for each kilowatt hour or megawatt hour of energy you put in the grid, you get this much amount of revenue. So any curtailed energy is lost for the power plant owner who is putting that energy. For it is general for any kind of power plant, be it nuclear or thermal, coal, or wind or solar. So we should always try to avoid curtailed energy in the systems, and this is becoming more and more prevalent when the grids are getting congested in the current and future power systems. But this is becoming an aspect of design in hybrid power plants, because the whole hybrid power plant has the value, like we saw here. The value comes when you start overplanting, because you are putting more generation than the evacuation capacity, than the grid connection capacity. So you're designing that there will be hours when you will be generating more than the capacity, and then the curtailed energy or curtailment becomes a factor in your design, and you would like to minimize it. You cannot avoid it to zero. That will be very expensive affair and impractical, but you cannot avoid it. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so to be like put it into one thing, that when your generation is more than the your own requirement and you are unable to sell also, so then that is basically curtailment and you are losing the money. That probably you wanted to mean.
Yes, but the requirement is there is no requirement here in this case, right? Own requirement, because
So
it's a
grid,
hybrid
for
power.
example, when you are saying the grid capacity is not there, that means grid doesn't require it. No, no requirement from the grid side. That I mean by requirement.
No, grid capacity. What I was thinking is that this is the design grid. Like when you plan to put a power plant, you need to go and ask permit to, for example, in India, you will go and ask power grid that I want to put a 300 megawatt power plant. You provide
Okay.
me a connection, grid connection of 300 megawatt.
Okay.
So they will provide you a overhead line, most probably in India, around in the 400 volt, along with the transformer, and then
Okay.
you can connect your hybrid power plant to that
Okay.
grid. And then
Okay.
in India right now, it is a power purchase agreement. That means that when you are connecting, you have an agreement with the government that for each unit of energy you produce, you get certain money. And I'll give an example later about
Mhm.
that. But the point is that now you got this 300 megawatt grid connection from the power grid, so you can only push 300 megawatt
Yes,
maximum.
yes. Yes. So
But
if I
you're
generate more than
designing your
300,
hybrid power plant more than 300, then you have
yeah,
to curtail that.
curtail. That is the loss. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So thanks, Arti,
But
for asking the question. Many other participants probably have some doubt that got also clarified, and
yes,
including, thank you.
yeah, but it's a very good point, Dr. Khanra, because this is the major difference between hybrid power systems like microgrid systems or mini grid systems or island systems, where you have always a load to
Mm,
satisfy, and then the additional power you send to the grid. So there is a
mhm,
major difference
mhm,
here.
mhm.
You do not have the load. You have
Okay.
some auxiliary loads inside, like you need to still power your own SCADA systems and many
Okay.
things inside, but those let's not consider them, like
Okay.
lighting the control room and things like that. But
So it is
that's it's
mainly for grid, mainly to be
yes,
fed to
exactly. It's a huge
utility.
utility grid. The
Okay.
equivalent you can think about a hydropower plant run
Yeah.
by like Bhakra Nangal Dam hydropower plant
Mhm.
projects, right?
Okay.
Similar way,
Okay.
where you
Okay.
do not have any load to satisfy.
Thank you.
Okay, so the mathematical formulation is this net present value. So what you are trying to maximize. So that is basically, so this part of it is the P is the price, and then the power generated in each hour is this, and this is the price of each hour, and then this is the operational cost divided by the discount factor, because when you are doing any investment, you are getting you are taking loan from the bank, and every year you have a discount rate or interest rate that has to be. So the whole discount factor thing is that earning money in the first year has more value than earning money in the 8th year, because of this discount rate. So that comes into picture here. And then this is the capital cost of the capital investment cost, and you are running it over the lifetime of the years, lifetime of the project, which is around 25-30 years. We have many constraints here, that this is for the sizing. So the decision variable is how much wind, how much solar, and what is the energy and power rating of the battery you should put. So the all of them are greater than 0, because they are positive numbers, the amount of wind, solar, and battery you would put. The curtailment is also a positive, it cannot be negative curtailment. And then we have some battery constraints. This is uh, how will you call it, the energy or power balance equation, that this is the generation from the wind, generation from the solar, plus the storage in the battery, minus the curtailment, is what you are sending to the grid. And then we have also state of the charge and the dynamics and all those things in there, in this equations. Okay, I'll not go into those details about the matrices, but there are capacity factors like I talked about. There is levelized cost of energy. So what is the cost of energy generation for each kilowatt hour of energy? What is the cost of generation, and energy to power ratio, or this is also called C rate of the battery. So these are many performance matrices we have. We have few assumptions. I'll skip them for now and will come to back later. But this is from Telangana region I was talking. Yeah, so solar capacity factor is around 24%, and wind capacity factor is from 30%. This is from a real power plant by Suzlon, and they are our partner in our project. So this is real data from uh, two power plants which are around 100 km apart in India. This is the power purchase agreement contract which came. The contract is a bit more complex. Please go ahead and read it. I will not going to explain that now, but we have simplified it, and then the contract is already awarded right now. That the peak price is, this is convert in INR, around I think 9 rupees during the peak and 6 rupees in off peak, or 3 rupees in off peak or something like that, per kilowatt hour. That has been decided. Please look up those. We have converted them to euro for our purpose. And then we have 6 peak hours every day, which can be in the morning between 6 to 9, that we know in India, when we go to office, that's the peak hours. But also in the evening we have also another peak hour. So we have assumed this is the peak profile, but the peak profile can shift during day-to-day operation. But in this example or experiment, we have keep it fixed. Also, the negative correlation you can see very well in the wind and solar data. What we have here, you can see that when the wind is high and solar is low, and vice versa. And if you look at the market, there is an energy market which has recently been established in India. So this is the market from the SRLDC, the price, and you can see that this is highly subsidized, the energy price you are getting from this peak non-peak auction. Whereas if they would bid in the market, this hybrid power plant, instead of getting this revenue from this auction from the government with this subsidy, then it would have been much different. And with the case study, we'll come to that later. The project, the cost breakdowns, and there are many cost components. I am not going to go into those details here. And yeah, again, the cost components, they are mainly from IRENA international organization. They have a very good catalog where they compare the cost of different technologies for each of those each of the locations, including India. So please have a look there. Battery energy cost is also from there, and some INREL data and some Danish Energy Agency data, but some of the data is also from DNVGL presentation from in one of the conferences. So what we did, we have few base cases here. One base case is that you put all the wind solar storage, optimize, like you put optimize using the optimization for wind, solar, and storage. Another case is that you only put wind and solar. There's another case that the grid connection, we have assumed 300 megawatt. Like I said, that you only put the solar behind that and you only put the wind behind that. So those are two different cases. Another thing is that instead of this morning 3-hour peak and evening 3-hour peak, if we just bid in the market price profile instead of getting the auction price, how does it look? And then another case study is just if we assume that the peak is only coming in the evening and not in the morning, how does that look? So these are the 6 case studies. We'll have a look here. So for the optimal case, we found out that the wind should be of 171 megawatt and solar is 378 megawatt for this 300 megawatt connection with 271 megawatt hour battery, means with 83 megawatts, so around 3-hour capacity rate of the battery storage. And this is lithium ion battery we are looking at here. Yeah, these are the capital cost and IRR and PV and all those economic metrics, but let's skip that. But let's look here. Okay, so when we just put solar, what does it happen? So our cost is low, so it's 29 euro to generate 1 megawatt hour of cost with this only solar. With the wind, it is 38 euro per megawatt hour in India. When we combine wind and solar, it is between these two, 32 megawatt. But when we have wind, solar, and storage, then it's much higher than all the three cases. It's 39 euro per megawatt hour. But then the cost is increasing when we combine wind, solar, and storage. But the revenue or the profit has also increased. In case of solar and wind, it is 36 million euro, whereas in for the wind, solar, and storage, it's 82. It's almost 3 times you are getting the revenue with slight increase in cost. So that's the value of hybrid power plant. This is with the morning plus evening peak, and the, how is it called, with the power plant purchase agreement prices. So this auction has happened, and then the price has agreed after that auction. I do not remember the companies who own the auction. I think something called Renew Power or something like that. I do not remember exact name. But they have won the auction, so they are going to build a hybrid power plant. The location is not decided yet, in India, of 300 megawatt grid connection capacity, and they will put wind, solar, and storage. And this is the case study for that case. Um, Capacity factors, another thing is that it was 23 and 29 what we started with, but with the base with the uh, optimal case, it is increasing to 46%. So we are 46% of the time we are able to provide power to the grid, or other way to see is the full load hours. So if you assume this is a full base power plant with 300 megawatt generation, then out of 8765 hours in a year, you are around 4000 hours you are providing the full power. This is a conceptual concept, right? You are not never providing the full power, but in terms of energy energy content, so it is equivalent to 4000. A nuclear power plant of 300 megawatt will have close to 1 capacity factor, because it's a base load power plant which is providing all the uh, close to 100% capacity factor. So around 8765 hours it will provide the power, except for those hours when you are doing the maintenance. Is there energy curtailed? Is, you can see that we, even with this design, we have around only 2% energy curtailed. So this is very, very, very good results we found out at this price. Remember, again and again, the price is very important, the 9 rupees and 3 rupees thing. Then what we did is that we compared it with the market prices, that instead of providing that subsidy, what if we just bid in the market the prices from the historical data, last year's prices. Let's take what was the price of energy in SRLDC, and if this hybrid power plant would to bid there, what we see there is no value on hybrid power plant. So then it will only put solar power, and they will do a little bit of overplanting. Instead of 300 megawatt, it will put 377 megawatt, but it will not put any wind or storage there. When we are going for the evening peaks, in the evening generally the wind is high, but then there is no value of storing the energy and using that in the morning, because the peaks are not coming in the morning. Then it is not putting any battery storage anymore. So then we are going for wind and solar, but this is still with the revenue or the price from the auction. Still that so hybrid wind and solar has a value, but much lesser than the base case of having wind, solar, and battery. I'm also looking at another number which I cannot see here for some reason. Was it Yeah, I was trying to look at this number for other cases. I don't have it there, but also we see that the capacity factor during peak hours, this is very much requirement from the Indian power system. That's why they are going for this peak non-peak uh, kind of trade. So if we would put only a wind, that would or solar, the capacity factor will be around 23 to 29%. But if we put this, we not only get 46% during the peak hours, 54% of the time of the peak hours, this hybrid power plant is able to provide power to the grid. So this is very helpful to the grid, and this was a brilliant idea by MNRE to go for this kind of bidding, by SECI and MNRE to go for peak non-peak kind of bidding. We perform sensitivity analysis and we find out that discount rate, which was we were taking around 7%, has the major impact in the NPV. So 1% change in discount rate so is having a big impact. So if you are the power plant developer and you are worried about wind cost, battery cost, and what not for, and want to develop a project like this, the first thing that needs to be fixed or considered is you need to go and talk to the bank and fix your discount rate, because that plays the biggest role in this. In terms of buying the battery energy capacity, again the discount rate, but also battery maintenance costs. So when you are having the contracts with the battery supplier, the maintenance cost also plays a major role in terms of the battery energy capacity what you are going to buy. We also did some mathematical global sensitivity analysis, which is polynomial chaos expansion. So it's called Sobol indices, very famous uncertainty analysis model available there. So Sobol indices, what it finds out, so this is similar to a Taylor series expansion, you can think, but what it says find out is that how much the Sobol first order index means, like, for if we look at this figure, that wind turbine cost in itself, how much impact our NPV. But the Sobol total is saying that in not only wind turbine cost, because when you change the wind turbine cost, maybe it also changes some other factors in the system, some because that would impact that how much PV you are putting, how much battery you are putting, and all those things. So all those interactions are captured in the Sobol indices when you have the total Sobol indices. So this individual and then the total Sobol indices provides the wind turbine cost, not the sensitivity for wind turbine cost, PV cost, battery energy cost, and discount rate. And this is a formal verification method, and it also shows that discount rate plays the biggest role. But but also uncertainty plays a major role in terms of modeling this kind of sizing optimizations. So I think I have covered all the discussions and things like that. So before we move, we have around half an hour more and many things to cover. Maybe a quick break for a question, or one or two or a couple of questions before we move to the next topic.
Yeah, if anyone has any question, they may ask, but I think like it was quite clear. Uh, I, not being from the power system background, I could understand. I mean, I learned some new terminologies also. So, anyone is there from participant side would like to ask any question? Please unmute and ask.
What is the running maintenance cost is high or
Which maintenance cost did you say?
running maintenance cost in long term?
I mean, those are input factors, right? Those are here, for example, we have battery management system. These are the I don't think I have the maintenance cost here, but generally the maintenance costs are much smaller as compared to the capital cost. Here, like there is fixed O&M cost. This is 8149, for example, PV, as compared to the panel cost, which is how much? Less than 1%, I would say, or even lower. So generally they are less, but for battery storage it can be a bit high. But again, then how you model it? The point is that the battery has a lifetime, and if the project lifetime is 25 years, you will not have a battery over 25 years, so you need to replace the battery. But then which component of that battery you will be replacing? So that can also be in the maintenance cost. If it is only the electrolyzer that you need to maintain, maybe because you do not need to maintain the converters, they are connected because they have more lifetime. So there is also this energy management part of the battery, and then the capacity management, which is more the megawatt kind of thing. So how do you model them impact? Sometimes in the maintenance cost, if they put the replacement of the electrolyzer in the maintenance cost, then the maintenance cost can be very high. Some other people, they just put that in the capital cost, that consider that we have to have time of replacement, so this is the capital cost. So then you will not put that in the maintenance cost. I hope that gives some indication to the answer.
Yeah, I didn't have this idea that like even this replacement cost or like that cost is considered in the capital cost, considering that they has to be done. So this is a new thing I learned at least. Okay.
Yes, this is, I mean, when you are going for this €1,000,000
Mm-hmm.
kind of investment and you need to get that loan from the bank, they need to have very detailed, I mean, so because they need to put those, there is something called
Yes.
markup cost. So that's like markup contingency cost. So they put quite a lot of margin in their cost, and then it could also be in that location. But like I say, these projects are so new, and there is not enough data and knowledge, and mainly it is with the industry, so that is not very well developed, that how they are doing it for battery storage and things like that right now.
Okay. I think anyone has question? Otherwise,
Just small clarification, Vash. Just tell me one thing. Whatever you are discussing, this is part of hybrid power system.
No, part of hybrid power plant.
It's a hybrid power plant.
Yes.
But your title says it's a hybrid wind power plant. It's how these two are different.
We come from DQ wind energy, so all our design involves that one of the major resource is wind. It could be solar plus storage, but we are not focusing that here, for example. So all the hybrid power plants has wind in as a resource in my presentation. But the concepts is agreeable with any hybrid power plant, I would say.
Okay. I got it. Please carry on.
So now we move to the energy management system. So then the point is that you have made a design, you have wind and solar and storage. Now how would you manage to maximize the profit? So this example, to make it more simple, we just took wind and storage. We do not have solar here. And then we looked at the Nordic market here, or the Danish market. So how the market structure looks, we have a forward market, we have a day ahead market, intraday, and then regulating market. So intraday market is not very well used in Nordic systems currently, because the regulating market is very well used, which is in more close to real time. So we are more focusing on day ahead market and regulating market. Another thing what we saw that is that wind, when the wind power is increasing, there is a negative correlation. So more wind in the system, the price of the uh, uh, electricity is low. So the wind power plant owner or hybrid power plant owner, when they are bidding in the market, they are generating less and less revenue. So that's also the whole point of this section called energy arbitrage, that can we start shifting some of the generation to some other hours, and then we get more paid more when the wind is not blowing. So the question is that, can storage play a role in the increasing the revenue? I'm focusing on revenue here and not on, because this is in the energy market, and from the previous slides you saw that when you go in the market, there is no role of battery storage in terms of maximizing the profit, because the costs are still high. So we take away the cost in order to understand how much revenue you can generate and which kinds of markets you should play in. And because also the cost is changing day by day. If we put in the cost and we see that there is no value on storage and we throw away the whole research area, that would not be fair. So we rather stick with the revenue instead of profit in this analysis. So how do we start? We start with that the input is the day ahead market forecast and day ahead wind power forecast. When you have that day ahead market forecast and wind power forecast, what you do a bid in the market, that how much I'm going to generate in the next day at this hour based on this forecast, right? And then how does that optimization looks like? Is the maximizing the revenue, and then you have all the constraints that the rated power should be less than the grid connection capacity. Like I mentioned, the evacuation capacity, there's energy balance, like I mentioned again before, that and then you can either charge or discharge. This charging or discharging is than that. So you don't need to consider that, as long as you are able to provide that energy. Generally it's within few minutes that you can ramp up. Even for the like lithium ion, they can ramp up in milliseconds and seconds. So that is more of a dynamic problem, which will come later if I get chance. I have many slides, but I'll come to that later. But that's a good question. Thank you. But the end of the day, what should be the remaining charge? If you do not put a goal that at the end of the day I should have this much charge left in my battery, you will always use up the whole battery in that period, and then the next day you do not have any charge left in your battery to use. So there is a value or price or revenue in keeping the battery charged at the end of the day. So how do we set up that goal? Either we can assume that the goal is fixed, that I want 50% of my battery charge, or 10% of my battery charge, or 20% of my battery charge at the end of the day, or we can put a price based on the historical price with a probabilistic model. So we looked both of those systems, that at the end of the state of the charge, how much energy is left and what is the cost or price of that energy or revenue of that energy left. Now we are moving more closer to the balancing operation, towards the real time. So we have the real time power production, and we know what we had bid in the real time or in the day ahead market. Then you have an opportunity to correct that bid in order to minimize that penalty. And this is a very simple algorithm, but here we would consider those ramp rates. If the battery, especially with this flow batteries, if it is lower, then we need to include those ramp rates in here in this kind of computation. But when you have done that, so I'm not going into this, is very simple. So you check whether there is room in your battery left, so that, and there is mismatch between the scheduled power and power production. You have more energy, then you will charge the battery or you will discharge the battery. But whatever you are doing, you do a bookkeeping in order to see that what you have done in the real time, so that you can fix the settlement, which is the next actually this part here, the settlement, how much you have done in both from the spot revenue and balancing revenue to calculate the final revenue. So the case study, we have a 50, this is a real system from Japan, but the battery was, I think, nickel cadmium, sodium sulfide battery, which is not very used in the rest of the world, but Japan still uses quite a lot of sodium sulfide and nickel cadmium and those batteries. But we took that parameter from that, so we have 50 megawatt of wind, and the 50 megawatt of or 51 megawatt of grid connection, and 34 megawatt of battery storage, and then we have around 8 hours of battery storage. But that is a parameter we tune in terms of sensitivity studies in our following results. But this result is very interesting. So oracle, what does oracle means? Oracle is like God, and you get to know the perfect forecast. You can also call it perfect forecast. Maybe that's better terminology. Oracle sounds funky. But so you have a perfect forecast, and when you have the perfect forecast, even without the battery, your revenue can be increased by 3.9% as compared to having not so perfect forecast. So the wind forecast is generated from the DTU wind energy tool called CoreRes, and then the market forecast, we developed a machine learning based long short-term memory based forecast. So when we use that forecast, so what we looked at, that if we used the battery only for balancing, what we see that just having the perfect forecast and doing balancing, you only get 0.5% increase in the revenue. And without perfect forecast, the balancing market is giving only 1.3% added revenue. But the major part of the revenue is coming from the spot market and balancing together, or mainly spot markets, where perfect forecast gives you a potential of 21% and 11% when you do not have the perfect forecast. That means that if we can improve the quality of our forecast, then we have a room for another 10%. This is eaten up by the quality of the forecast. Next, the role of the SOC goal. Like I said, that if we fix this fixed goal, like that is 8 hours is 240. So 10%, 1 hour or 30 megawatt hour if we store at the end of the day, or 60 megawatt or 90 megawatt. So we get this rate curve in terms of added revenue. But instead, if we use the remaining price of that stored energy based on historical data, even that's probabilistic data, with a probabilistic model, we get much more revenue in terms of using that instead of a fixed goal. Further, the number of cycles is also much higher when you have the fixed goal as compared to the probabilistic model. That also shows that that the lifetime of the battery is increased. So it's coupled value. We all increase the revenue by certain percent, not much, maybe 1%, but the number of cycles have reduced by quite a lot. So generally, we have 3,000 or around that cycles for a lithium ion. So if you can save 20 cycles of that in a year, so that saves quite a few more months, or over the 10 years of the battery, or 5 years of the battery, you just gain 1 more year of the battery. So that's a huge benefit. We did analysis in terms of the energy capacities. So now we start using smaller and smaller battery to a larger battery, so 1 hour to 8 hour battery. And what we see, still the value is in the optimization spot market. That is more or less intuitive from previous result, but the size of the battery has an exponential role. So increase in the size of the battery increases the revenue exponentially. But even if we have a smaller battery, for example, if you have, like, let's say 60, so that's like 2 hour battery. So going for spot market optimization has 2.1% increase, whereas a 8 hour battery has a balancing going in the balancing market has only 1.3% increase. So even with smaller battery, it is more advantageous to go for spot market than going for a huge battery and do the balancing services. Disclaimers that this is based on the Danish prices, which is fluctuating, but maybe there are prices around the world which is even more fluctuating. And then the market principles are also changing. So what we did is that we applied this in the Australian system, and then which is very much more real-time market. So we had to develop a model predictive control based system. And what we saw that the in Queensland market and the South Australia market, it was infeasible, whereas in New South Wales and the Victoria, which is feasible because of the fluctuation of the energy prices, as well as the fluctuation of the renewable or wind in this case. So those things play a major factor, as well as of course the base prices. So that concludes my energy management system part. So if we have a question, or we can move to the next one. I think we do not have much time, so I'll.
Yeah, better you finish, and then if anyone has question, we'll take it up.
Okay. Next, we move to the more electrical and looking at the other talks in this FDP program. I see that this is maybe more relevant to many of you as well. So how would you combine those assets now? So that it can be AC coupled system or DC coupled system. AC coupled system is what we are seeing more and more in present conditions around the world. The reason is you buy the wind turbines from any OEMs around the world, Vestas, Siemens, Suzlon, GE, whoever, and you buy the PV system as as a PV power plant from another system, another manufacturer. Similarly, battery you buy it from another manufacturer. You, as a developer, you just combine them. You use all the off-the-shelf systems, be it controllers, be it circuit breakers, switches, and all those things at this megawatt scale and the voltage ratings. So off-the-shelf systems are available. It's ready to use. You just combine them and you connect to the grid. So that is, so as a developer, it's much easier for you to develop such projects. Whereas DC coupled system, where you connect in the DC bus, so you have a sort of a DC wind turbine. So I hope you understand how wind turbine works. So wind turbine is, you have a mechanical rotor which is connected, or it can be connected to a direct drive or through a gearbox to a generator, electrical generator. Then we have a full scale converter. This is the type 4 generator, or fully rated capacity generator. So but we have a DC bus there before we connect to the grid. So in that DC bus we can connect the PV as well as the battery storage, and then we can connect, put a bigger inverter here. So then we can get rid of all the small inverters and the cables and the transformers. So that is the cost saving in there. But then you have to develop a new control and new circuitries, like circuit breakers and things like that. And also sometimes the reliability is also going down because this converter fails. All those resources are failing. So in the AC coupled system, like I say, so it's suboptimal utilization of electrical infrastructure, but it's easy to implement, and all the controllers can be readily used. So how does this is a typical control hierarchy for any hybrid power plant, that you have the wind power plant controller, solar PV plant controller, and base controller, which is then connected to the individual turbines. For example, this will dispatch set points to individual turbines. Solar PV plant controller will send set points to individual strings, which will have an inverter there, like a string here. To each inverter it would send a set point. Same for the base. And then you have a hybrid power plant controller, which would get traditionally a wind power plant control or solar power plant control gets some control functions from the TSO. Most of the time it operates as the maximum power plant point tracking mode, but sometimes it can also get a signal as like a balance or delta operation, where they have to put some reserves because of the congestion in the network, or providing some grid services, frequency services to the network. And then we have a main controller and the dispatcher, which dispatch into the individual power plant, individual wind power plant, solar power plant, and base controller. But now we have talked that EMS is coming, so we are not operating as the maximum power plant point like we saw in the previous with the battery. Rather, EMS is giving signals every 15 minutes or every 1 hour, that how much the wind hybrid power plant should generate and how much energy it should store, and the TSO is communicating in case of any requirement for curtailment or grid services, additional services.
Excuse me, what is TSO? What is the full form of TSO?
Sorry, that's very European. So it's the transmission system operator. So in India it's called Transco or Disco, for example, or Discom. I don't know exactly how it. So the transmission system operators or transmission system companies or distribution system companies. It can be like Tata Power, where you are connecting, or it can be a POSOCO where you are connecting, or NLDCs, SLDCs who would be connecting to, whose grid you would be connecting to. Like the main function is to maximize the revenue or the profit. Additional control modes like the no power limitation control, delta balance power limitation. And then the main controller would have the PI controller, where they are wind up PI
Hello.
controllers. And sorry,
Sorry.
yes.
What types of control system we are using? I think adaptive control system we are using. Adaptive
Uh,
control is more convenient for this.
doesn't I mean it doesn't matter. Generally, the industrial practice is to just use a PI controller. They do not do any advanced control, but in literature you can find optimal control, adaptive control, model predictive control. So that kind of control is more going into the objective of the control. But generally for large power plants, still it is typical PI controller which they are using. I do not know of any power plant today in the world which has more advanced controller than the PI controllers.
Okay, thank
Yeah, and then you can have all those ancillary services like frequency control and things like that. But so you get the available power which is measured from the individual components, and then they are transmitted. So SCADA also plays a major role in the communication delay based on this available power, and you take the decisions. You see the error signal here, and then your PI controller sends a PHPP ref, and then the dispatch block takes the decisions. I think I have the, no, I do not have the dispatch block here. Yeah, so take the decisions that how much power should be going where, and if you need to curtail, which generation you do curtail. Generally, the simplest decision is to charge and discharge the battery storage, but also sometimes curtailment, and then advanced control methodologies can also be included in there in terms of reducing the wake effects inside the wind farms, or reliability. Some of the components have failed, so including that in the system, so increase the lifetime of the components and things like that. So those advanced controls can also be in those dispatch blocks, advanced logics. This is a typical dynamic model. I think maybe you have already seen this. We have developed this over many years. So this is prime mover, where you have the aerodynamic model, which is the basically the CP curve. You know the is very well known. Transmission system is generally modeled, or transmission means this is the gearbox transmission and prime mover transmission. This is generally modeled with 2-mass model. You can also use higher order models, but then getting the parameters, accurate parameters, is very difficult. Then the generators is generally, they are constant current source, but they are typically they are modeled as ABC to DQ conversion, or the Park transformation, and then there are two controllers which are basically providing these are the controllers for those inverters, PWM controllers. Yeah, so I'll skip. We can go in details about those things. Similarly, PV also, it's very well known models from Wake, and then the base model we have taken from the Dick Silent Power Factory here. So, but they are very well known model, and with the same kind of control that you have the MPPT control and active and reactive power control on top of it. Similarly, the DC coupled topology, you provide, so you have only one control level here, a hybrid power plant control, and then you are just directly talking to the each inverter control of those hybrid here. So you are getting rid of all the intermediary control layers. So that also increases some of the reliability of the system to get rid of those control layers. And similar control functions like we saw there. So you have the hybrid unit dispatch and then the hybrid. So this is basically inside here. If you look into, so you have the dispatch function and then the hybrid unit controller, because in this you get in set point in this inverter, and then you have to send the signal to individual wind turbine, solar PV panel, and the battery storage there. The dispatch principle can be that battery charge you do instead of providing curtailment. You have the battery limits there, you have the ramping capabilities. When you have to do the deloading, you choose wind turbine instead of, or curtailment, you choose the wind turbine instead of PV, because PV has faster ramp up capability. So when you need to bring up the wind turbine, it takes more time and things like that. Those things can also be taken into account. We chose, so PV you can be deloaded in that case, that it is faster to bring up. But wind turbine can also be deloaded if you see that there is a value in terms of reducing the mechanical load in the wind turbine, and that increases the lifetime. And so yeah, so you get all those power reference measurements and power references, and then based on that you provide the set. You have a PI controller again there to set minimize the error signal again. Yes. Yeah, this is, I think you are able to understand the concept now, so I'm not going into details. Again, the performance analysis we do, this is in the simulation scale we did, and we can see that they are very good performing in terms of following all the available power generation and all the control modes. Here we do not have maximizing the power, the EMS is not coupled here, but all the control modes we get, be it zone B is in the delta control mode, and this is no, this is in the balance control mode and delta control mode, and then we are going back in the MPPT mode again. So we are very well able to capture that with our control systems.
Hello.
Hello.
Excuse me. In PI control action, there is offset error. How you eliminate that? That should be taken into account. The offset error factor.
Could you, I would say just wait for a few minutes. Dr. Das, first you finish and then we will take that question, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I would suggest that. Yeah. Dr. Mohanty, you just wait for a few minutes.
Then another important topic is hybridizing the, and I think I'm out of time now, so I'll very quickly go through that, hybridizing the hybrid storage or hybridizing the storage. So you can have this kind of topologies, like where you are connecting the battery along with the supercapacitor here, or you can put the supercapacitor inside the wind turbine in the DC bus here. So this is semi-active topology because you are only putting one DC-DC converter. Active topology is that you are putting two DC-DC converters for individual, and then this is the supercapacitor in wind turbine. So we simulated all those controls, and yes, here we can see that for different group control, is this the one? Yes, I think that is the one. We can provide the frequency support for different group control from the wind turbine as well, which is very complex control algorithm when you have controlling all the components at the DC bus. But also HES can also provide the similar support. And then the fast frequency response you can provide for 5 second or 30 second, like here you can see that. But for wind turbine you cannot provide like 5 second or 30 second support. For that you would need bigger battery storage, and the battery storage plus uh, supercapacitor. And then I think one of them, just to quickly show, where was that? Sorry. That wherever you are, this is the input signal you provide to the supercapacitor, and then battery is picking up, but I cannot see that figure here. Or anyways, doesn't matter. But the point is that firstly, supercapacitor, which is very fast, takes up the capacity, and then you bring the battery storage later when the supercapacitor is going down. Like the capacitor starts charging, when then the battery starts coming up. Lithium ion in itself can provide very fast capability, but we are more looking at the flow batteries, which is becoming more cheaper as well in the future and has less environmental impact, those batteries. So flow batteries does not have that fast ramping capabilities. So supercapacitor, combining them with the flow batteries, has very useful value. And we are trying to do some demonstration in the National Institute of Wind Energy facility in India, as well as in the DTU wind energy facility in Denmark. So this is the facility we are building now. This is the last slide, I promise. And then just this is to give a flavor that if you need to have some kind of facility in your system. So we have the GL wind turbine. So we have a 225 kilowatt. We have already one, and we are putting another 225 kilowatt wind turbine machine. We have around 200 kilowatt of solar panels there. And then we'll connect open research converter so that we can change all the controls in these research converters. We are also looking at putting some supercapacitors in the DC bus and some vanadium oxide storage in the both DC and the AC bus. Then we are also putting a controllable grid interface so that we can emulate all those grid characteristics, be it frequency support or voltage or whatever, or emulating those market conditions. We can emulate all those things in the controllable grid infrastructure. In the middle layer, we have the research controllers, which we can control, and we can put all the code, all the programming in MATLAB or whatever programming language, and import them into those research controllers so that we can control them, which would interact with the electricity market. And we also get many external signals like forecast and the weather measurements as well. So this is how our campus looks like with the wind turbines, and this is where the PV is. I think that's all. I'm sorry I had to pace out quite a lot. Towards the end, there were quite a lot of information.
Yes, actually you wanted to give us as much as possible. So, now the participants, I mean, that time Sangram Kumar Mohanty was asking some question. Please ask the same question now, because I wanted it to finish so that someone can want to leave, they can leave now.
In PI action, where you are telling that you are using PI control action. In that case, the offset error may be created some problem.
Not necessarily. No, we do not get always the offset error. If it is P controller, we always have a offset, right? But if you are well-tuned integrator, you generally do not have offset. But sometimes the offset can come with the losses, but then you have to model that as a like, I don't know if you have known about about the IEC 614027-1 6140027-1. That's the wind turbine models. There it is very well defined. Please go have a look there. That generally when you are if your measurement is coming from a very different location and is not near the controller, then you will have an offset in terms of drop. But then you have to put a value for that drop. And still the rest of the offset will be still there will be an error which should be able to be controlled by the PI controller, and as long as you have the wind up limits enough to handle that. But I don't think that PI controller would have offset. It's more P controllers would have offset.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So anyone else has question? I don't think, let me see if there was any question in the chat box, but I don't think so.
I don't see any either.
Yes. Yeah, Aarti was only asking, and that has been answered properly. So now I don't think any question is there, and they're not asking even any more questions. So we can assume that two things, like the things were like so high that at this moment asking question is not so easy. And second thing, like they know everything. Okay, so with this, Professor Bikaroy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. You finish it.
I'll do. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Kaushik Das. First of all, like the today morning session was basically on hybrid energy storage, where the storage was multiple. Like as in the end, you have also was showing that battery and supercapacitor. But in the third session, it was totally on the hybrid of the source side, that is wind and solar kind of thing. So it has been a very good complementary session, I would say, both the things. So it has completed kind of. And regarding the information, like as you are handling the real life project, and it's not only the India, your earlier part was in India, and now long time you are there. So I see that you have a very wide knowledge worldwide what is happening, at least in the wind. So that was really inspiring and informative session, as many participants have pointed out. So I would, of course, say that yes, it is like many people can think of taking up this as project, or if someone is still working on their research problem, they can take up this one, because we have a few very new research scholars as the participants. They may think of considering this, and especially like for the non-power system background people, and like me, I could know few new terminologies which probably now would be easier for me to talk about. So thank you so much for giving us so many information, especially real life information. It's not only in the paper, but actually it is happening around us. So thanks again. With this one, I would like to conclude this session. And
thank you,
hope
Dr. Chandra. I would also like to thank you for this invitation and this opportunity to talk. It was very nice for me also to get so long time. Generally, I don't get to present this longer, so that was very helpful. Please feel free to contact me or all the participants in my email. Also, look, we have a very good Coursera. If some of you don't have a background in wind, we have a very nice course in Coursera for free on wind energy. Please have a look there. But we also have an online wind energy master program, which is not free, which is quite expensive, but it's very relevant during this lockdown period and things like that. So also try to have a look at those for more interesting work in the wind energy in other fields as well. Thank you.
And please do inform us if once you visit India, maybe if like the opportunity comes to be, maybe we would like to invite you to our institute that time when it would be physically possible. So anyway,
sure.
Hope to meet you in future. So thank you, sir. Do you have any announcement? Yeah.
No. What you have said at the last, I just repeat that whenever you visit next, it will be our pleasure to invite you to our campus. Right? We don't have wind, but we have 1 megawatt of solar in the campus.
Nice.
Right? Yeah. So therefore, we can have some practical exchange of tips. How to, because it's very nice. That you have been doing so nice work. Right? You have been doing so nice work. So thank you, Dr. Kaushik Das. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation and sharing all those information with us. Thank you very much.
Thank
See you
you.
next.
So for participants, now that quiz would be shared. So you keep an eye on your email box so that you can answer before that gets closed. Okay. So tomorrow morning we meet at by 9:45. Okay, sir. So can we leave the call?
Yeah, this it is shared now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It is shared now. So it will be live for 10 minutes. So please answer within 10 minutes. So we can leave the call. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow morning. Thank you. Thank you.